universal signal for we're going to start in a minute. That's the universal signal. We're going to start in about a minute. Yeah. Is it an announcement from our AV crew? I'm sorry, I forgot your name already. John. John asked us to use the mics tonight, so I know we are having a public hearing too. So if you could please speak into the mic. We usually like to have you identify yourself and your name and your address. That's a little reminder, and then commissioners too, if you could use the mic. So I guess what it is it pick? Do you have a meter on there, a voltmeter, or? Oh, your ear. Okay. Oh, it does show up though, does it? Yeah. Is that the microphone you're using? No, or you tied it to the P? Okay. Oh, okay. I see. I see. Go, Mr. Mill. You want to do the pledge of allegiance? Okay. Stop. Pat, do you have an extra pen? Yeah. That's good. You got it right there. I'm all right. Whenever you're ready, Pat. You ready? Good? Okay. Okay, I bring to order the EIC Commission for the City of Danbury. This meeting September 24th, 2007, approximately starting at 7:04. First, I'd like to do the roll call, starting from my right. If the commissioners can identify themselves.
William Mills.
That's Bruce Arlees.
Jessica Soriano.
Mark Massoud.
John Fagan. Okay, next we'd like to have Commissioner Soriano lead us in a Pledge of Allegiance. If you could all, do we have a flag all right? Yeah, speaking to the mic. Yes. Here you go.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jessica. Okay, the first on our agenda, we have a public hearing. It's 3-5 Sugar Hollow Road, regulated TV number 762. The way these public hearings go, we first listen to the applicant, and then we open it up to the public. I'm going to try to put a time limit on it, about an hour. We'll see how we are in an hour. It's much conversation we have going. We could always extend a little bit more, but since we have two public hearings, I'm going to try to limit it to at least an hour each. So we're going to try to finish up the left for about 5 minutes after 8 on the first one. So if the applicant's here, 3-5 Sugar Hollow Road, if you're ready. And again, if you could clearly speak into the microphone, and again, always address who you are. And
Good evening. For the record, Dinas Verbicus, Artel Engineering Group in Brookfield, Connecticut. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, representing and proposing the shops at Marcus Dairy on Bacchus Avenue and Sugar Hollow Road. It's been a while since our last hearing, a little bit more than a month, I guess. What I tried to do in between the last time and this time is try to address whatever comments I could write down that the commission had made or questions the commission's had, and I tried to answer it in written format as well as by submitting supplemental information. And if you may, you can all reach in. I think you've all got a packet with a little letter, and you can follow along if you like. And reading on from the letter that we wrote, there was a question regarding what effect our development had on floodplain storage, which is a great question. And as it turns out, by developing the site as we have proposed, the map on the left-hand side indicates that we would have roughly 118 cubic yards of additional flood storage when compared to existing conditions. So in essence, by developing the site, we're going to create more area for water to pond in the watershed itself. And we do that, accomplish that by shaping the land, cutting in where grades are high and trying to balance our cuts and fills to provide a little bit additional storage. In addition to that, and we didn't include it in our calculations or in this number here, we do have pipes underground, and if we were to add that in, that roughly another 100 or 200 cubic yards of additional storage to what we've calculated. But we didn't add that into this number. There was a request for pollutant loading calculations, which you should have in your packet. And if you review the calculations, the resultant is that our pollutant loadings will decrease when compared to existing pollutant runoff conditions. And it's a fairly simple to just see it by virtue of how the site is currently developed, which is for the most part pretty much impervious, and we will be adding a bit more green space to the property when compared to existing conditions. There was a request for an aerial map depicting Kissen Brook and the impervious surfaces along Kissen Brook. And we've done a twofold type of submittal for you. And I'll walk over to the board and show you a large-scale map, but we included, in addition to the large-scale map, an 11 by 17 copy of the map. And basically on this little map that you have before you, we tried to depict, for the most part, things in the general vicinity of Kissen Brook that are impervious. And we've colored in a brightly colored yellow would be the buildings, rooftops. A little bit duller yellow color is impervious surfaces, pavements, concrete and such. And then in blue, we show the bits of Kissen Brook. And in red, we show the areas where the Kissen Brook had been culverted by the airport. So it's a pretty self-explanatory map. And I can show you a larger version of that map.
Dennis, what's the reasoning for this?
There was a request made just
okay.
To see what how impervious things were and how close the impervious coverage was and so on.
Okay, I apologize.
Provided this bit of information for everyone to review.
Dennis, I'm sorry. Could you, if I may, could you point out where the site is? Because I don't see it readily identified on the
Marcus
map.
can- Yes, but the site is located in the right portion of that map.
Any other questions, Mr. Massoud?
That was it, thank you.
Okay, and then there was a request made to give ratios on existing developed versus undeveloped, to which we've also prepared a map and basically the existing ratio of what I called undeveloped would be just basically grass areas. So as it currently exists, the grass areas on parcel A are roughly 8.3% of the entire parcel. Parcel B, which is a small triangular piece, let me get this other map back up for you. right now, parcel B is 100% undeveloped. It's just fallow land. And then once developed, parcel A will have an increase of grass surfaces. That'll be 21.1% roughly of grassed areas. And parcel B will be now 74% undeveloped. In other words, 74% grass as opposed to the 100% grass that it currently is. And if you go to overall ratios on both parcels combined, right now both parcels combined, roughly 75% of the area is impervious or developed. And as we have it proposed, it will drop down to about 69% of impervious or developed coverage. Next, we were requested to prepare a map showing the 100-year flood line on a map that's easily taken out into the field, and we prepared an 11 by 17, basically showing where the 100-year flood line falls on the parcel. And I hope this will be useful for site walks that the commission may take. Then there was a question raised on exploring including some primary treatment methodologies on the site, to which we already have some primary treatment proposed in the way of infiltration trenches. We've got some infiltration trenches proposed on parcel B, the triangular piece of property on the north side, and then we do have infiltration proposed with our detention systems from the roof drains on the proposed buildings. And to incorporate more of that primary treatment basically is ponds or open water bodies. For one thing, the land area is not there for creation of ponds. The other thing is that due to the proximity to the airport administrator dislikes having open water bodies because that attracts waterfowl and causes some air traffic problems. So again, it's not recommended on this site, and I think working with infiltration is the way to go, or at least giving the opportunity for water to infiltrate. One thing that I hadn't explored during the initial design, but certainly we could consider if the commission would like, is installing perforated storm drainage pipes in addition to some of the infiltration systems. This way, some of the trenching might be able to take in some of the water as well, rather than having two discharge points to the Kissen Brook. Also in your packet, you'll find a Kissen Brook watershed map. I didn't put it up on a board because it's a little bit tough to read. But when the commissioners take a look at the map and see how large the watershed is for Kissen Brook, and exactly where the water is coming from. Interesting thing that I found in reviewing some of the maps and files and other things at Town Hall, I actually found a map where it had actually proposed the expansion of the Danbury Airport in 1940, and it showed how the Kissen Brook was it just shows a line for how the Kissen Brook was to be channeled. Basically, right along the properties, and you can actually see the bends that they had proposed. Interesting how things happen over the years. Next, there was a request to add some buffering and brook enhancement to the Kissen Brook itself, to which we had asked our landscape architect, Matt Popp, to create a plan to assist us with clearing out the site. And I'll put it up briefly. It's in the packets, the maps. I'll show you briefly. Mr. Popp proposed, and he basically laid it down And then there were some questions regarding the snow removal procedures and snow and you know, how snow and salt will be handled. And the site will, in the wintertime, be plowed like it currently does. The snow will be pushed out to the perimeters and allowed to, I guess, naturally melt back towards the water course and off the site. And as far as sanding or salting, we don't propose to do anything in addition to the normal practices. We won't do anything different than what the state DOT or city public works does for their roads. Then there was a question about how flooding would be handled, and I think we touched on the flooding aspects in that we will be providing additional flood storage on the parcel, so that once it's developed, there'll be more volume for the water to spill into, so to speak. And the last notation that I had from the last public hearing was responding to Mr. Danzer's comments. I believe there were four sheets that I was handed, and that I figured was best left to the experts. And to that end, what we did is we had invited our soil scientist, Mr. Henry Muller, to come, and he can make a brief presentation on soils findings and perhaps some comments to Mr. Danzer's report. We also asked that a third party take a look at our flagging and Mr. Danzer's reports and make some comments. We had hired Mr. Burton Lau, a soil scientist from Garrison, New York. I don't know if any of you are familiar with him or not. He's been around for a while. Has looked at
You know, has he presented or been involved in any other?
He's written a letter of his findings, which is also in your.
I just know sometimes we get outside experts. We'd like to find out their accreditations. Or I'm not. Well, I'm just saying if there's a list of it.
But if you wish, I can certainly.
Sure. I mean, I think you put into the record. Deanna, are you familiar with Mr. Lau at all, or have you worked with him before? Mr. Lau, am I saying it correct?
For the record, Danbury, yeah, he's pretty famous in the field.
Oh, okay.
Soil scientist, he's been around a long time.
Okay. So that answers my questions then.
And if I may, we can hold off on questions a little bit later, and we can have Marcus
hold off
and
or- Okay.
Henry Muller.
Any other commissioners like to question this time, or do you want to wait till the end?
I'd be happy to wait to the end.
Okay, so if you bring Mr. Mueller.
One second, just for the record, Neil Marcus, Cohen Wolf PC, on behalf of the applicant. Just a couple of things that Dinah's addressed, I'll give you a little more background on. One of the, as Dinah's talked about the Kissen Brook, as you may know, the Kissen Brook was actually man-made. The old Kissen Brook disappeared when they built the Danbury Airport back in the 30s and 40s. So what you see here basically is a drainage channel that was done to the airport, but they still call it the Kissen Brook because that's what it used to be. The question that I wanted to address was the snow removal procedure. It's in item number 10 in the RTEL letter, but right now, as Dinas has indicated, the snow is plowed from the center of the site out to the edges, and we hope to do that and leave it there to melt naturally as it's done over the years. The snow salting of the parking lot, interestingly, we will reduce, I believe, the amount of salt that will be used on this site, because right now, as you'll see from the comparison of the current developed versus the proposed developed, we're actually going to reduce the impact of development on the site as a total. But what's obvious is that we're going to increase buildings where you don't have to salt and sand the area, the footprint of that building, and we're going to decrease our yard, which is currently being used as a truck terminal and has been for the last 60 years. So we would intend to probably have less sand and salt than we currently apply. So to the extent that we're talking about environmental impacts, they'll be less than what exists. But the other thing, of course, is whatever standard is adopted by the state of Connecticut and by the city of Danbury, because, you know, they salt everything around us, and they certainly spread a heck of a lot more salt than we do on their roads. We would adopt the same standard, and we'd expect that to be a condition, obviously, of any approval, that their standards will become our standards. Again, with respect to Mr. Lau, you know, I think Dan has said it, he's very well recognized. Henry will explain to you, again, some of his findings, and you can ask him questions directly, but I draw your attention to the last paragraph of Burton Lau's report, which says that Henry Moeller's soil report is as complete as could be using standard methods. The site could be gridded and examined with a geoprobe and a soil classifier used to log the borings without trying to relate it to all the USDA classification names. This may not be necessary for structural design or hydrology, but would be mostly academic. Quite honestly, we're not looking to engage in an academic discussion. If you read the Lau report and then talk with Henry, it's going to be pretty apparent that the entire site was filled. I know it personally because the site on the north portion, excuse me, the north and west portion of the site from Sugar Hollow Road was filled by my father many, many years ago. Was a kid I actually saw when they did the construction. They expanded the site. On the other flip side, on the flip side of Bacchus Avenue near the Danbury Fair Mall, that was actually filled in combination by John Leahy, the Wilburite Corporation, when they built the mall, in the city of Danbury when they relocated Bacchus Avenue. I mean, there's no question that we're talking about fill. And interestingly enough, we discussed some of the pictures. Whoever filled the site didn't do a great job grading it on the Bacchus Avenue portion because they left little depressions. So when it rains, you get puddles. And we're guilty of the same thing in the area near the brook on the currently Marcus Dairy side of the site. We never really did a final grading. It was rough graded, and it left depressions, and they fill with water when it rains. The puddles, they don't come out of the brook, but they just take a while to evaporate or to drain into the soil. Having said that, I'd like Henry to present to you and answer your question.
For the record, my name is Henry Moeller. I'm a soil scientist that work on the property. First of all, I'm going to kind of actually talk of both parcels as, you know, as one entity, Parcel A and Parcel B, although there are two reports. Essentially on Parcel A, we have not only, well, first of all, just as an overall introduction, the land has been filled, and it's also been a combination of drainage and fill, as Kisson Brook has been channeled, basically lowered the water table, you know, very low, so that during normal times, basically soil is drained down into the brook. When in dealing with urban land, first of all, on Parcel A, a large portion of it essentially consists of urban land. That is pavement and buildings and other structures. The remaining portion of it basically is Udor fence, which is basically fill, which consists of the gravel parking lot. In Parcel B, virtually all of the land has been filled, and essentially it's been substantially filled. In flagging the wetlands on what I'm dealing with basically is Kisson Brook. Now, first of all, for a wetland soil, if we're talking poorly drained or very poorly drained, the soils must be saturated during a portion of the growing season. Obviously, the filled land simply does not meet this criteria. Concerning flooding, virtually, if you look at all the soil types that are listed as alluvial soils, basically these soils show characteristics of flooding. That is, they don't have a defined, well, they have a very mixed, mixed profiles with buried horizons or topsoils. They also, basically you can see it as it's a mixture. There's a lack of soil development, a lack of a bead horizon, in these areas. But one of the most important criteria which these soils, if you look at all the soil surveys, is that these soils are subject to flooding on a regular basis, whether they be poorly drained or moderately well drained or even well drained. And when we say regular basis, when you get to first of all, there's the very poorly drained extreme where essentially it can be flooded virtually, a couple of times a year depending on your rainfall patterns. When you start getting over to the other end, the dry end of the of alluvial soils, then we're dealing with flooding that's essentially common. That basically you have a flood at least once every 10 years, and for these type of soils and for that type of development. Going beyond that, in terms of when you start discussing a 100-year storm and that, then we're really getting beyond soil criteria, and that when I start dealing with basically filled land, highly altered landscapes and that, essentially any flooding criteria, I leave that to the engineers in terms of, because they have a criteria for a 100-year storm and 500-year storm and that type of thing. In flagging the brook, essentially going on both sides of the parcel B and parcel A, the banks of the brook that are, essentially, I know that the brook does have fairly high peak flows, and Danbury, and it does have a large watershed area. So essentially, I made the assumption that essentially most of the flagging is going to be relatively close to the top of the bank. Any soil areas that are included within the flagging area are basically those low areas that are subject on a regular basis of flooding. And this is essentially criteria that I have always followed, and basically as far as soil science is concerned, that we follow. Some of the, because of the soil disturbance of some of the soils that are included within the flagged area, first of all, you had channeling, so that meant essentially they dumped the excavated material up on the sides, and basically they were concerned primarily with creating a deep channel. These soils are therefore highly disturbed. They're highly variable in textures. In terms of putting a name on them, the best name is we simply call them aquants. I used to call them Eudorthens wet, but I found that that's an error in classification, so aquants is the proper term. Virtually all the other soils, in terms of going along Kisson Brook, I observed areas that were, obviously subject to flooding, rack lines, debris lines. However, when I got into, in parcel A at the rear of the parking area, you have obvious fill, substantial fill, and there you just can't make any assumptions. So that kind of an area, I would never try to second guess what the flood frequency is. Obviously, there is some flooding because some of the area is getting sort of low to the in relation to Kisson Brook, but that essentially is really covered, can be covered by the 100-year flood criteria and that type of thing. So that is basically the in terms of the my investigation. Virtually the type of soils that was below below the fill, and that is really irrelevant. I did some extensive work for Wilmerite back in the early 80s. We did some deep holes, which we found to be very interesting. And this was actually in the parking areas that were kept in grass. Basically, there was over 2.5 to 3.5 feet of fill over organic soils, and these organic soils were very compacted. At the time, some areas, in terms of where the water table was, that was a little bit of a, that was rather interesting, because if, in the holes that we hit, if there was a clay under the organic matter, we're talking now holes that are a good 7 to 8 feet deep, we found that essentially the water would be below the organic soil. The organic matter was very compact, and of course the underlying material would be saturated. In the areas where we found sand, that was kind of interesting, because there we actually had pressure from coming up, and so we would have a water table sitting about 4 inches from the surface.
Bring in a little bit, are you talking about Wilmerite site?
I was
Or are we talking about this?
Wilmerite, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I would just try to keep
I
it
know
to
it's not
this.
relevant, but I just wanted to let you know that,
Thank you.
you know, I've had a lot of experience in the area. I've observed the area for, many years.
I know we have some commissioners that might have some questions of you too, so.
Okay, I'll be glad to answer questions.
If you're all
I'm
done.
done, yeah.
Any commissioners at
Yes,
this time?
referring to Dr. Danzer's report, and I'll be specific, parcel B. He said their floodplain characteristics.
I'm really not sure what he's talking about, floodplain characteristics. I know that there was a picture that was taken April 14th showing some ponding on a site.
Right here, yeah.
But I did not see really, any real floodplain characteristics. Again, this is filled land, and to try to guess what exactly the,
Well, to be more specific, he went 16 to 18 inches with an auger and found molting in floodplain soils in parcel B. And he made about 6 to 8 test borings going along on that parcel B. And there was definitely molting, which is a floodplain.
modeling.
Modeling.
Well, the problem is, in trying to evaluate this, we don't know whether this was the original soil or not, or whether this was material simply brought out or dredged up from the brook, and then simply spread out over the area. When we're dealing with, altered land, they did a lot of different things, and I don't agree with that at all. First of all, I don't even think it's relevant whether you do find, so-called alluvial soils below the fill, because the area has been altered substantially. And what's very common was that when channeling is done of a brook, you basically simply spread the material back out over the, you dredge it out, and if there's a lot of material, spread it out over the land. A lot of times you're going to have dark soil material, which be high in nutrients and that, and basically support the vegetation.
So even though that there's modeling there, you say it's inconsequential.
Well, if the modeling may have been due to the material that, when it formed in place, which might have been at the bottom of the brook or so, but when it's transported, or moved up, you really can't tell, and it's no longer relevant, because the modeling never goes away. Once it forms, if you move the soil somewhere else, the modeling is gonna stay, even if it's a well-drained, very well-drained condition. And this area is just too highly altered. I just can't it's simply not relevant.
So even though the state of Connecticut recognizes floodplain soil, you know, as a regulated area, you're saying it really doesn't matter? Because of the
Well, it's
movement over a
buried
period
under-
of,
Yeah, but it's
of how many
buried under
years?
fill.
How many years has this fill been going on? I mean, right now, there currently exists characteristic of floodplain soil. And like
Well,
I said, he went 6 to 8 different places, didn't specify in one particular spot. He went throughout parcel B just to check to see if it was just an isolated pocket, and found out that it wasn't.
I can tell you, Bill, I'm familiar with when they dredged. They dredged since they started back in the 40s. How do I know that? My father has been on that site since the 40s, but lived in the neighborhood since 1919. And he said clearly that what they did is the Kissin Brook, where it is today, he said that the trickle of water of the brook, he said, is nowhere was where it was before they built the airport. What they did is they dug out this channel and dropped the level of the water. They took the fill, they put it on the side, because the banks were built up. And that's how they did it. That's what you see today. All created, and as Henry said, they took whatever muck was in the bed of the river, the stream, the brook, and put it up on the side. Then they covered that with fill. The last fill on that site, which I'm not being, was in the early 1980s. It was done by Wilburite when they were building the site across the street, and by the city of Danbury when they were redirecting Backus Avenue. They moved Backus Avenue. They moved Backus Avenue closer to Kissin Brook. It used to be much further away because between Backus Avenue and the brook years ago were the parking lots from Leahy. The Leahy built that parking lot. But then what happened is when they moved the road over, they told me, I saw it do that. It was early 80s. I was on the site. You can watch it. They changed the contours and the grade. So, with respect to, I know what you're saying, that this would normally be regulated, this type of, but when you start to get 2 feet into the ground, you gotta very magnetic personality. You killed the virus. But when you start to get, 2 feet into the ground, it becomes a question of whether that soil has any floodplain benefit. And I guess that's the question.
Actually, what's a floodplain soil essentially would be a soil that's, it was created by flooding. However, here we have a combination of channeling, basically ditching, dropping the water level, and filling over the rest of the area. So even though, you will have, soils, you will have alluvial soils underneath the material, but it's no longer active as part of a floodplain. Now, I just saw that one picture about some of the flooding, right, at the back of the parking area. Well, that is strictly filled land, and in terms of any flooding criteria, again, I have to say that that can be determined on an engineering basis. I would not attempt ever to put a line through the parking lot based on or trying to base it on soil characteristics. It's just not relevant.
Just to answer, Attorney Marcus is telling us, and I believe all of it, going back a number of years. I guess the most current thing that we cited was 1980, when Wilmerite did some filling. But I think we're all aware of the fact from 1980 to 2007, not only state but city regulations pertaining to wetlands and the protection of wetlands has dramatically changed. So while it might be of some issue or history that you want to go back and address prior things, things have changed dramatically since 1980 as far as both city and state regulations to maintain wetlands, water courses for the protection of not only the current people but future generations.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't have any dispute with that. But to follow that through, to really to protect the floodplain soil that you find 2 feet in the ground, what you have to do is to basically unfill the site, have to excavate, which we can't do, number one, because in reality, that is part of the override site plan. I mean, whatever grades were set there were approved from the city of Danbury.
In 1980, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was, but to get to your point, you're absolutely right. You want to go back and restore the wetland, you'd have to do a lot of excavation.
It's not so much restoring, Mr. Marcus, it's just to make sure that the current regulations are met by all applicants.
That's right. So the question, I think, following that is, will this activity proposed affect negatively impact the floodplain soil that is located on the site in the deeper test, the 18, 16, or 18? That's the question. And if so, you know, how can that be avoided? If it will impact? We don't think it will impact it at all. But I guess, you know, that's the question, right? Because keep the soil.
It's just gonna stay there, and any flooding that occurs, for example, April 15th, we basically had a 100-year storm. And, you know, the flooding occurs on the surface, and it basically is gonna be on the surface of the fill and, you know, on the surface of, you know, some of the parking areas. And, it just, again, I had I'd worked on the Wilmerite project, and, you know, most of the wetlands, especially where all the parking was done at different times, was filled. You know, we checked that at the time. So, you know, all of this has been altered so substantially. Your entire, your whole hydrology and everything is just totally changed. And we no longer have a wetland there, period.
You know, Henry remind us, the April 15th was the pictures of the tunnel. On that day, Marcus Dairy operated its fleet of equipment the same as any other day in a 100-year flood. Trucks that were parked or any equipment that was parked back there was moved out and moved back in. These tunnels weren't flooded. I mean, you know, they didn't affect our operation that day at all. So, it's not, what you can, well, what maybe Dr. Danbury considers to be flooding, we consider to be tunnels created by the fact that there was no grade there. It had a property that was graded towards the brook. The water was not as ponded, it would have flowed, run in the direction of the Kissing Brook, down towards Cedar Street. It's just, quite honestly, we didn't take any care when we built that site 30 years ago. By the way, some of the material back there are tailings. I mean, we used to get from the state of Connecticut, some very construction sites where they, you know, chew up the asphalt, they want to get rid of it. But back there, it was basically, that was clean fill. So, if the ponding, which I call public, is an issue, in reality, all you gotta do is take a bulldozer there and reshape the surface. Today, it's not gonna change the wetlands of the water. It's gonna continue to sheet grade as it always has. Right now, it's sheet grade in the bubble. We've been on this, my brother reminds me that the day that they were doing the boring on parts of the, he actually drove into parts of the with a car. You know, he went through. Anyway.
I'd also like to remind you too that, I know the pictures that you see are dated April 14th. Well, we had between 2 and 3 inches of rainfall, basically on top of a rather late spring thaw, that, you know, basically, because I'm very much aware of this, trying to start field work. I ran into frost in the last week of March, and you know, and it just didn't go away all that fast. We had 2 to 3 inches of rainfall that night. That would have been Friday night. The 14th was during the day. When those pictures were taken. Then on top of that, we had over 5 inches of rainfall from basically Sunday, you know, into Monday. And I also keep track of rainfall.
I'm just gonna,
finally found my
I'm
rainfall.
gonna hold you right there. Everybody knows it was a lot of rain. Okay. Any other questions we can go over right now, since we have
No, the only,
over here? I mean, or is another question?
no,
Mark?
I'll have plenty of questions, but I'll ask them later.
All right, but I mean, is Mr. Moeller gonna be here at the next meeting, or?
No, they really
Or
don't
of the
pertain to
applicant.
Mr. Mueller. Mr. Mueller gave me his.
Okay, because I'd just like to keep this moving. Any other commissioner at this time would like to ask a question?
Well, I would just Maybe a couple,
Fagan?
couple quick statements, if you wouldn't mind. Maybe we can get Dr. Danzer here at the next meeting. If we're going to bring in the professionals from the applicant, I think that it would be appropriate to have Mr. Danzer here. I might also point out in the last sentence, in the second to last paragraph in Mr. Lau's statement, he does say that urbanized area floodplains do get changed. I think that's something very important to keep in mind. I'd also like to see, I'm not familiar with how famous, to use Dan's terms, or his extensive knowledge in the area, but I would like to see his credentials because he has concurred with Mr. Muller's report.
Anything else for this time? Okay, thank you, Mr. Muller.
John, when you're reading Mr. Love's report, you gotta go down to the paragraph the second to last one. Is that the one you were?
Yeah, whereas he does state that urbanized area floodplains do get changed.
The other thing is, you start with the beginning of that paragraph. It's his conclusion that urban hydrology is of more importance than the previous soil.
I agree. That's what I'm stating.
Well, that leads to the question which I originally asked for flood storage, because with the realization that parcel B, you want to put 4 or 5 feet of fill. So even though that April rain, a lot of it ran into parcel B, you're going to be filling that with 4 feet of fill. And that's why I asked earlier from Dynas, what about flood storage, because you're going to be reducing that area.
But Dynas, I think, answered the question that though we're filling, we're going to cut at the same time. We're going to increase the flood storage for that very reason.
That'll have to review.
Yeah, we do that. That's exactly what I said. Basically, although we're filling on the north side of the brook, we are excavating considerably on the south side of the brook, and creating more flood storage.
And just another clarification, the Danbury Mall can't use any salt. They can only use sand on their snow.
You know what? I like that idea. I hate salt. It's ruined many cars of mine.
Plus going into Kissing Brook.
Again, a lot of materials we got tonight for the first time. If I could ask maybe the commissioners, maybe hold back some of the comments for the next meeting. We have a very long meeting. We still want to open up to the public. A little bit of housekeeping, we need an extension letter.
I have one because I wanted to see if we were going to get to that point of close tonight, so if we're going to...
Well, I know we're not going to close the public hearing tonight, that's for sure. Okay, so if you could file an extension letter, we need that for housekeeping. Unless there's any other pressing question, or again, I know Mark, Jessica, that you want to ask tonight, or do you want to hold off review the community? All right, back on, but I do open it up to commissioners at the present time, so we do still have to hear from the public. Okay, commissioners, at the time? Okay, at this time, then, I will open it up to the public. Anyone would like to speak for or against this proposal as it stands? Now would be your time to come up. Anybody would like to speak for or against this proposal? Again, it is a public hearing, and it will remain open through next meeting, too, which will be October, thank you, October 10th, 2007. Yes? Oh, feel free to come up. Yes, you just have to identify yourself. Please, hold on 1 second, please. There's a procedure involved. You have to sign in. You tell us where you are and where you live. And go ahead, feel free to do that.
My name is Henry Erickson. I live on 51 Bear Mountain Road. I used to live at Shady Acres Mobile Home Park, which is right over by Danbury
Still need you to
Airport,
sign in, though.
and Marcus Dairy. And for years, I drove in and out of that road, and I picked mud turtles off the road. I would like to know what impact this is going to have on the wildlife in that area. That's my interest. Henry Erickson.
Okay, that's great. Again, anybody for the final closing for this meeting, anybody like to speak for or against this proposal at the present time? Okay, Okay, that'll be to our next meeting. Dan Brody, did you want to make a comment?
Record, Dan Baruti, Health Department. I just wanted to make a recommendation to the commission, and it's basically goes along with Bert Lau's recommendation in his last paragraph, where he talks about doing the gridding and the geoprobe to determine whether it's a floodplain or not by soils. And he says it's an academic, mostly academic pursuit, but what we're talking about here is a regulatory question. And we need to know where that boundary is, where the floodplain is. Dr. Danzer says it's on the edge of Bacchus Road, Bacchus Avenue, and their soil scientist, Henry Moeller, says it's at the top of the creek. We need to know in order to perceive where the boundary is.
Could Mr. Lau give his opinion as like a third party, or is it?
Well, I think what he said here, the way to determine it is to do the gridding and the geoprobe.
So this is your expert.
Recommend that, but I'm saying it's regulatory.
Yeah.
Well, where's the line? That's our staff recommendation.
So is there anything you possibly want me to request of the applicant tonight?
Yeah, that they initiate
Geoprobe?
the geoprobe as their consultant had
Is that
suggested.
done in a timely fashion, or is it?
Probably.
I'm not sure, you know, again,
Take that request under consideration and figure out, in reality, the floodplain is designated, in reality.
Attorney
the
Marcus,
floodplain
thank you.
Is designated, and that's what we're using the designation by FEMA. And that's the floodplain that we have to deal with. The floodplain soils is, Henry has indicated, and Lau as well. Lau says it'd be academic because they are buried. I'm just not sure, I mean, we'll dig up, I guess, whatever we have to dig up, but I'm not sure what we're looking for. In reality-
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I have a
Mr. Fagan.
question. Mr. Mueller, we can find floodplain soils in areas that aren't in a floodplain. I mean, isn't that the fact? Floodplain soils exist outside of a floodplain. The 100-year floodplain is clearly indicated on the map. It's not anywhere, it's on the other side of Kissen Brook. What the discussion is, or the argument, is whether there may be these particular soils found by Mr. Danzer. Possibly, Dan is right, we'd have to, according to Mr. Lau, we'd have to do some further testing. But the argument is whether these soils have, if there's any great impact, because these particular soils can be found outside of a floodplain. Correct?
Oh, that is possible, because, well, matter of fact, I've, you know, just in my own town, I've run into that, you know, problem. But, in this particular case, we're dealing with the existing topography and existing watershed area as it exists. And, whatever soils are below really have no bearing anymore on what the, you know, on what the flood hazard is. The soil is rather irrelevant. Basically, the flood hazard has been determined by engineering criteria, by FEMA.
Right.
And, you know, basically, they leave it to the engineers to really determine that, because you can't really see, you know, I can't tell you where a 100-year flood is going to be, you know, by walking over, you know, parcel of property. It's just not possible.
I have a compromise.
Commissioner Marcus,
I have a compromise.
Attorney Marcus.
To make to move this along. We have done borings of parcel B, which are actually deeper than geoprobes. We've done borings for structural purpose to figure out what we're putting a building into. We will make those available to Mr. Brody, and they should answer any of his questions, and then more. I mean, he'll go much deeper with our borings, and we won't do the grid unless that becomes necessary, but we'll at least give them all the data that we have, which we thought was somewhat irrelevant, but if it's relevant, we'll give it to them.
All right, could you share those with Mr. Lau too, the other expert, the second?
Oh, sure,
Okay,
yeah,
so maybe
sure.
he can comment on them.
That make sense?
Because he's kind of like the one that's asking for them.
We've already drilled this whole site, so I don't want to drill it again. But we've got that data. We'll give it to you. I think they've tested most of the site. Buildings, yeah, I mean, they did it randomly. They didn't do it as a grid, as I say, but you'll get a pretty good idea of what's there. You'll be, it'll be, I think, enough to answer your question. And if you need more, we'll point out where we want more borings, and we'll go do more borings. But we've got extensive borings. Yeah, but under Connecticut, you only go down you do it with only in the first 9 inches of the soil. You don't go down 2 feet to find out regulated activities. I'm going to give you the deep tests for what they're worth. We stopped with our probes where Henry stopped and where Lau stopped. That's what the Connecticut statute requires us. We're going to go beyond it to satisfy. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Yeah, two say that.
No, he said, find it, your second
Okay.
guy said you need grid and geophone to find out where the regulated area is.
Well, we'll give you the information. And we'll ask Dr. Lau Mr. Lau, whether that's sufficient for him to expand on his report as well. We'll send it to him. Thanks.
Any other commissioners, any further comments? Commissioner Mills?
Dennis, on your letter, September 20th, number 4, it says that the property is being developed as proposed to be less impervious surfaces than there is now, right? Correct. But if you go, if this is approved in parcel B, you're going to be adding impervious surface, right? Correct. So then that would be.
No, I've broken down in the chart on a parcel-by-parcel basis and on an overall basis. And on an overall basis, we're reducing the impervious coverage. Although, if you break it down on piece by piece, yes, we're increasing impervious coverage on the north side of the brook.
Henry, I like the Henry today and B together, so I the same.
Well, if it's all one, A and B together, then we're certainly reducing the impervious coverage on the entire parcel.
And the second question I have is,
It's okay.
number 6, the last sentence, unfortunately due to site constraints, including easements, so on and so forth, cannot easily accommodate additional primary treatments as outlined in the State of Connecticut 2004 Stormwater Quality Manual. What are they talking about, and what are you going to do about it?
In other words, there's numerous ways to provide primary treatment to stormwater. Some of them we are proposing. Infiltration trenches, one. I guess, again, in the infiltration through our roof drains, could be also, another method. But other methods that they recommend are basins, open areas, and we don't have places where we can put these open areas or basins, not only because of the way the site is configured and where the floodplains are, but also because of the fact that we're close to the airport. And it's something that the airport administration does not want or need near the airport.
So you're limited in your primary treatments.
I think,
You're
again,
less than,
I think what we're looking to do is treat things subsurfacely. Yeah. Sounds strange. And again, what we could offer to increase our area where we can potentially infiltrate into the ground is we can propose to have perforated pipes connecting the catch basins so that we do take advantage of some of the more pervious soils on the site for infiltrating water that way.
Thank you.
So in essence, create more of this primary treatment.
but right now you're kind of restricted because of the various things you said, the easements, the airport, so on and so
Oh, yeah,
forth.
the site is,
Can't really do what you really would like to do because of your restraints.
the site is covered with sanitary sewer easements, drainage easements, water easements that we will be adding. So it's aerial easements from the highway. So there's all sorts of restrictions on this site.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for commissioners at this time? Mr. Brody?
Yeah, two more points. Diane reminded me that there is an issue with drainage, quite a wide one that's maintained by the city, 100 feet, as you see on this blue line on parcel B, and 50 feet along this reach of the stream. So they're showing proposed fill in the 100-foot city drainage easement as part of their building plan. And that would have to be reviewed and approved by the city of Danbury.
By planning or by?
Engineering, and they need permission from the common council to fill in our drainage easement.
Attorney Marcus?
We're aware of that. The language of that drainage easement doesn't require us to go to the common council. We do need the city engineer to review the plan. We certainly aren't going to obstruct the drainage easement. Actually, the drainage easement seems to propose that maybe a pipe would be put in to pipe water into these streams. But sheet flow will still continue, and if the city wants a pipe, we'll put a pipe in. That's an engineering issue in reality. I'm not sure you guys want to get into that unless you want to start talking about the engineering of the site. It's not necessarily a wetlands issue. It's the city's drainage easement. Whatever the city wants, we're going to do, and if they need to come back, then the engineering department will come back here and ask you for permission to put in a pipe. Unfortunately, if they put in a pipe, there's nothing that goes into the pipe because they don't have a catch basin system to feed it. But we'll do whatever the city engineer. We're aware of this. It's an old 1940s easement, as I understand it. It's old. So I don't think we need to go to the common council at this point. All we need to do is not obstruct their right to drain, and we'll build it if that's what they want. We'll build a pipe.
Brody?
By their plan, they're showing, they're asking permission to fill within that drainage easement. And that will constrict it. And the purpose of the easement is to drain the airport and the rest of the area. But that needs an engineering review. And my last point is that, similar to a previous application that we had along the Still River, that I would refer this to DEP for comment in their flood safety unit. Similar to that requirement that we had for, I believe it was Batista, his application to build new buildings in the floodplain of the Still River near the Toyota dealer. So
Okay, so I mean, could you do that first then, or
the applicant has to do that.
has to do that? Attorney Marcus, did you hear that comment? Basically, Mr. Rudy's asking to refer this to DEP for a comment, the plan, if you could get. That's what I guess Mr. Rudy's asking for. Preferred, if you could.
Is there anybody particular you want to go to? I mean, okay.
Okay, so you can work that out.
Whoever you want to go to, not on the surgery, we're not going to But we'll be happy to send it to
Okay.
whoever you ask us to send it to.
And plus the letter of extension. That's what we're gonna get. We have that, oh, we have that already. I apologize. I thought we did. No, I was asked to ask for it, so. The final thing I have for Dinah's, marking of, the storm drains too. Dinah's, I don't know, it's been a month. Did we cover that last meeting? You know, this will flow into Kissing Brook. Okay. Exactly. I just want to make sure that's not anything going further too, on all the storm drains. Got it? Okay, good. Okay. Any other comments from commissioners? I look for a motion to continue the public hearing to October 10th, 2007.
I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing, next regular scheduled DIC meeting.
Second? Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Fagan, seconded by Commissioner Seriano, to continue this public hearing to our next meeting, October 10th, 2007. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, it passes.
Mr. Chairman, just as a request, if Dr. Danzer is planning to be here, could you just confirm that with us? And we'll arrange to have Mr. Moeller back again if Dr. Danzer will be here.
With that, yes? Call. I believe
I had
there are
made
two
that
yeses,
as a suggestion.
3 yeses. So consider it.
Yeah, please tell him, let us know.
Yeah, I'll let you know, work that out with them between now and then, and if
Thank you.
could. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda, we have 65 dash, go ahead, do you need a hold for you? Okay, we have a public hearing, 65-67 Bear Mountain Road, regular activity number 678. And once again, this is an open public hearing. The public will be allowed, as you just saw demonstrated, the first one, to make comment and come up to the podium and request information, whatever you'd like to do. Basically, we'll go over that before I open it up to the public. First, we'll hear the presentation from the applicant. And again, if you are here for that one, feel free to move your seats. They try to put it here so best that you can see what's going on. But we do ask you don't interrupt the meeting in any ways until it's your time when we open it up to the public hearing. Again, I could ask the applicant if they could have the maps, so it's kind of almost viewable from almost to off, turn them that way. I think everybody's got a good sight on it. Thank you. Larry want to? Yeah, I mean, you want to speak? When do you want to speak? Before the public hearing, or no? Okay. All right. We give you preferential treatment. One nice cozy group. Now, once again, these files and all these maps are for public viewing in the permit center, the city of Danbury. Again, this is for the public. You can go down there at any time and take a look. Any of the new materials that are handed in to us are also there for public viewing. The only thing I'm going to have to ask you is once the applicant starts, like he's going to start in a few seconds, that we may have you not block the map. And again, this is something you could even talk to the applicant even after the meeting, too, if you had. We've always had conferences after, too. If you had questions that may not come up in the meeting, you could always maybe